Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another live show. Just got back from T-Mobile Arena here in Las Vegas, where the Lakers fell 121-94 to the Dallas Mavericks to drop to 1-4 in the preseason. No Luka Doncic, no LeBron James, no Austin Reeves, no Jake LaRavia, no DeAndre Ayton, no Marcus Smart, no Bronny James, then no Adu Thero, no Maxi Kleber. Might have been easier to just state the players that did play in tonight's game. But yes, a long list of players who did not play, and I think that largely explains the result tonight. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. The hair is fixed for tonight's stream. And before we get into it, a couple of quick announcements. Number one, I finally figured out how to link the memberships to the Discord. So if you guys are members, there are now private channels on the Discord, the Buha's Block Discord, which will be linked in the description below. Also posted it on the YouTube community tab under the posts, updated link. I didn't realize, I'm new to Discord, so a lot of this is novel to me, but didn't realize the links expire after a week. So now I put them to never expire, so anybody can join. So feel free to share with a friend or share with anybody you think should be in the late night gang. So that's the first thing, the updated links with the Discord. And also for those who are members, you now have direct access to the private member channels on Discord. Second thing is my new national show, Beyond the Block, is going to be launching next Wednesday. And the tentative plan is going to be doing it once a week on Wednesdays. I have a special guest lined up. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this person. They have been on the show before. They are a fan favorite, and we will be recapping the previous night's games. So that's OKC Houston and then Lakers Golden State. So even with the expansion to a national show, the first episode will be recapping the first night of NBA basketball and hitting on Lakers Warriors. But we'll be talking about more than just Lakers in that episode next Wednesday. So wanted to get those two announcements out in front of you guys. But with all that said, let's get into the brief recap of tonight's show, or tonight's game on tonight's show, because there's not a lot to get into. Like I thought my overarching takeaway from tonight's game is I was encouraged by like the first 2.5 quarters. I was equally as discouraged by the last quarter and a half, particularly the fourth quarter. LA was outscored 37-8, and Dallas started the fourth on a 28-2 run through the first 8 minutes of the fourth. And JJ did not mince words after the game. He said he felt that group did not show toughness, and he would have liked to. He was asked, like, what do you feel like that group should have showed, or what do you wish that group showed in the fourth? He said toughness, and that is, it's not as direct or as like piercing as saying a group was like soft, but it's in that neighborhood. It is a cousin of calling a group soft, and I thought that was a pretty aggressive framing, but a pretty appropriate framing with how that group just really struggled and got blitzed by, to start the fourth quarter, some of Dallas's starters / regulars. And then even as they brought in the Dwight Powells and the Hardys and the Brandon Williamses, those guys just continued to blitz the Lakers third string. And Dalton was out there during that stretch, but it was Koloko and RJ Davis and those guys. So really embarrassing end to the game, to just be completely frank about it. But the first 2.5 quarters, LA was going toe to toe with Dallas's regulars. This was a dress rehearsal for Dallas, and they were leading going into the fourth quarter. And from the competitive portions of this game, the first half into about midway to late of the third quarter, LA had a lead and was outplaying AD and Cooper Flagg and Derek Lively and PJ Washington and D'Angelo Russell and Max Christie and all these guys. So I thought from that perspective, like, it did highlight some of my original skepticism with the Mavericks of just like that offense is a bit of a mess, and it's a lot of ISO ball. There's not a lot of north-south. The ball movement can be clunky. And I feel like I just praised them last night. So I guess I jinxed the Mavericks into not looking that good tonight. But that did highlight a lot of their weaknesses, I felt. But overall, I will say, like, among these stretches of Lakers preseason basketball, there's not been much we can take away, unfortunately. There's not been much that I think will directly apply to the regular season. There have been individual performances, that there have been stretches that have been encouraging. There's been a lot of stretches that have been maddening and discouraging. But I would say the first like 2.5 quarters or so, to me, were right up there with like the stretches of the Golden State game, the first half of the Phoenix game. Like, it was one of the more encouraging stretches, particularly the beginning of the game. I'll touch on Gabe in a second. And then like the middle of the second quarter, they went on another big run to extend the lead. So those two stretches in particular, and then a little bit of the third. But the Lakers, again, are contractually obligated to lose the third quarter. They lose it by double digits. Once again, they've lost the third in all 5 preseason games for various reasons. But overall, I just want to say, like, I was encouraged by the first 2.5 quarters. I was equally, if not more, discouraged by the final quarter and a half. But I think from like if we could take anything away from at least like the rotation part, and again, Lakers without their top, I would say, 4 ball handlers and playmakers, definitely their 3 best players, 3 best scorers and passers. So starting center, like, they were without at least 4 of their 5 starters. And then Jared Vanderbilt also exited the game early. So we'll touch on all that in a second. But I wanted to kind of highlight a little bit of the positive before we got more into the negative. Notable performers have to start with Gabe Vincent, who was unconscious to start this game, hits 5 threes in a matter or a span of about 4 minutes, and is looking like Miami Gabe on steroids. Like, he is flying. I mean, he looked like Steph Curry out there for that brief stretch. You know, Dame Lillard, whatever small shooter you want to compare him to, like, he's flying off screens, he's pulling up, and it didn't matter what type of coverage Dallas was in. Like, he was hitting everything, and that was often with Cooper Flagg as the primary defender and AD or Derek Lively as the drop defender playing up to touch most of the time. So really impressive start to the game for Gabe. He did cool off the rest of the way. He started 5 for 5 and finished 6 for 15. So he went 1 for 10 the rest of the game, and kind of had a bit of a come down from that. But 22 points all in the first half, and was a spark plug that really got the Lakers offense going early. Rui Hachimura, 19 points. He had a big stretch there in that second quarter, part of that second quarter run I referenced earlier. 19 points, 3 rebounds. He is a guy who, like, if we're looking at the starters, it's between Rui and Gabe. The starters tonight, it's between Rui and Gabe in terms of, Jackson, Vando, Rui, Gabe, Dalton. Rui and Gabe have to carry the offense, and I think they did their part through the first 2.5 quarters or so. Jackson, 12 points, 10 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal and a block. I thought he largely held his own against AD and Lively. That's a monstrous front court. Not really a front court he should be matching up with a lot when this team is at full strength, but he, there's some times where they got offensive rebounds or scored on him in the post or whatever, or scored on rolls. But like, I thought Jackson largely was fine in, elevated to a starting role against a pretty tough 4-5 combination. Vando continues to see mixed results offensively. And I think even the play, like, I would even argue the play he got injured on, if he was more comfortable offensively, I think he just goes up. But because he was uncomfortable, he kind of takes the extra step of hesitation. And that was sort of what led to that situation. To be clear, I'm not blaming it on that. I just think, like, it even on, like, my first reaction before I even realized he was injured was I was like, I just wish Vando would go up with that. And then he took the extra step, and then that's what led to the collision, and then what led to ultimately him leaving the game early and sitting out with a left quad contusion. But 5 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 1 block. No update from JJ. We'll see what happens on Friday. It's supposed to be a dress rehearsal, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I don't know if Vando's going to play in that yet. It might make sense to not play him, as unfortunate as that would be for LA to just get like one game together. At the same time, if Vando is even a little bit hurt, I think you want to be careful with that going into Tuesday, especially with his injury history. DK had a really weird game because he only had 8 points, 3 for 12 shooting, really struggled from three, 1 for 9 on threes. And I want to give a shout out to Pure Hoop who uncovered this. But basically, if you look at Dalton's shooting splits since Summer League, I think he shot 23% on threes at Summer League, 23%, or 23% post All-Star break, 23% at Summer League, and then 23% now again in the preseason. So like, he's not just like struggling from deep, he is like actively bad from deep. And it is a relatively small sample size, but it's enough of a sample size that it's becoming concerning. And that is the primary reason he is out there. And if he's not making shots and he's not making defenses pay for maybe cheating off of him on like a Luka or Austin drive, like it just becomes tough to play him because you're not getting much, if anything, from him defensively. He has been rebounding the ball better overall in the preseason. And that has been one thing I've been encouraged by and impressed by. Also had 7 assists and tonight. So he had this weird game where he almost had a triple-double, 8 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 1 steal. But he really struggled shooting the ball. He continues to struggle defensively. And so like it was a very mixed bag with Dalton. I would say more negative overall, especially because of I don't think you want to count on Dalton being like a near triple-double guy or a high rebounder playmaker. It's really about the scoring and the shooting, and that's an area where he continues to just really struggle overall. And then off the bench, not really like I thought Christian Koloko did a better job rebounding tonight, 7 rebounds in 17 minutes. That had been an area he had struggled, particularly on the defensive glass, and had 4 blocks. So this overall was probably Koloko's best game after I thought a relatively underwhelming to like neutral preseason for him, but otherwise not really much to get into. Like Nick Smith had some really bad turnovers and offensive possessions during that fourth quarter, and looked, a little over his skis and some of that, but not going to try to take away too much from the fourth in terms of individual performances. I think it was more the collective. With all that said, let's get into the 3 takeaways. First takeaway and most important takeaway, I think, is the injury update. So we got an injury update right before the game from Shams Charania of ESPN stating that LeBron is going to be, at the earliest, LeBron will be reevaluated. It was a little confusing, I'll be honest. It was a little confusing for me because it was like, he's going to be reevaluated at the earliest October 30th, but it's not guaranteed he's going to be reevaluated then. Then he said he's going to be out until mid-November. That was actually the first thing he said. He said, LeBron's going to be out till mid-November, or until at least mid-November. Then it's like he's going to be reevaluated at the earliest on the 30th, but that's not guaranteed. Then it was, if he is reevaluated from on the 30th, he's still going to miss a few weeks from then. And maybe I'm too focused on semantics here, but mid-November to me would indicate more like a couple weeks from then, not a few. A few is at least like 3 or 4. It's more than 2. So that would be more like the 21st to 28th. I would say that's late November, not mid-November. So maybe I'm just quibbling with the semantics here, but I thought it was a little bit of a confusing update on LeBron and where things were at. He did say in a macro sense that he's going to be patient and there is going to be an extensive ramp up from whenever LeBron is cleared to return or start the return to play process. Then you also had George Sedano, who was doing the sideline on the game, chime in on that report and say that JJ said like LeBron is on schedule and doing well and recovering well. So it was a very confusing update for me. I guess what we could take away is as we expected, LeBron is going to be out until at least mid-November, which is a month from now. So I think already that's blowing past that 4-week, and even the 4-week thing was a reevaluation. It was not a return. So I'm expecting LeBron to be back at some point in the second half of November on the early side. There's no guarantee that even happens. So I thought that was a noteworthy update to hit on. And then Jared Vanderbilt left the game, got banged up with the quad injury, and we don't yet know what his status is other than he just did not return, and JJ said that's it for that after the game. So couple injuries there. And then also Bronny missed tonight's game with a ankle injury that he suffered in the second half of last night's game in Phoenix. That was why Bronny did not play tonight. So those are the injury updates coming out of tonight. And then takeaway number 2, I want to go back to Gabe for a second because I've been really encouraged by Gabe. I think he's been one of the bright spots. I'm going to do on Monday, once we have the totality of the preseason behind us and I guess some sort of dress rehearsal on Friday. I'm going to do a stock report in terms of like, and it's not even necessarily going to be player specific. I will touch on some of the players, but I'll touch on like the Lakers offense, the defense, some of the, I think, statistical categories that are worth highlighting, and just talking about like what's trending up, what's trending down, maybe what's trending neutral. And certainly Gabe is trending up. And I think Gabe and Vando have been two of the bright spots in the preseason. And those are two guys who, said it before, like have underperformed over the last couple years. Like Gabe Vincent has not been worth his contract, both in availability, but also in performance. And there's no guarantee he's available for this season, especially looking at the last couple of years. But from a performance perspective, he is looking more like the Miami Gabe and more, I would even say like just the best version of him that we've seen at times with the Lakers. Like I don't think we've seen it consistently enough. And I think there's reason to have some skepticism of like how long this will continue. A lot of this has come in games where, I mean, LeBron's missed every game, Luka's missed every game but one, Austin's missed a couple games. So, and I would say in the game specifically, Austin, Luka, and LeBron have all missed. Gabe has looked better offensively. That would be specifically the Golden State game in Golden State and then tonight's game. So maybe there's a little bit of a correlation there. Also, Marcus Smart missed both of those games. Like when Gabe is more of the primary option or the lead ball handler, he does look more comfortable out there and he does get into a rhythm quicker. So that's certainly a factor. But I would say overall, Gabe, I think, has been one of the bright spots of the preseason. And I think earlier we were talking about him maybe being like more the ninth man based on how things were shaken out with, you had the top 6, let's say, which is probably going to be Rui at 5, and then Gabe at 6, and then 7, 8, 9 was going to be Vando, Laravia, and then probably Gabe at 9. But he's playing at a level where it's like that's a real competition, and Vando's playing at a level where that's a real competition. And of course, LeBron is out, so everybody's slotted up, and it's really a top 8, not a top 9 right now. But I think Gabe has been one of the biggest bright spots so far. And again, I think it's fair to have some questions as to how much of this will actually apply when they're fully healthy and if he can still maintain a certain rhythm and confidence when he's off the ball more. But I do think, like, especially tonight, he set this tone that they got out to, I want to say they're up like 22-10 or something early, and he was a really big part of that. So I think Gabe deserves his flowers for his performance up to this point in the preseason. And then takeaway number 3, before we get into the Q&A, is going to be the dress rehearsal, the big dress rehearsal, the preseason finale. There's been a lot of criticism about the way the Lakers have approached this preseason. I am not fully there in terms of like outright criticizing the whole process. I do have some criticisms with part of the process. I think they could have been a little bit more aggressive in practice with some of the guys. I think ideally they would have had 2 full strength games and not done. I mean, they didn't have the bodies really to do 1 full strength game and then have, like, imagine tonight it would have just been like this 5 bench guys. Like they couldn't have really done that, but it would have been nice to have seen like 2 games instead of 1, especially when you schedule 6. It's like the Lakers also the teams make their own preseason schedule. So the Lakers scheduled the most games, including a back-to-back, and then are only going to play their guys in 1 of the 6 games. Like that part doesn't really make sense to me. Would have made more sense to, like, if you're maximizing revenue, sure, I guess that's the best business practice. But I think that the more prudent thing with the preseason would have been 3 or 4 games and then having more practices and more private court time together to work on things. But regardless, like, the plan going into Friday's preseason finale against Sacramento is going to be LA having a dress rehearsal game. So JJ said it's going to be the healthy players. So I mean, Adu's going to be out. LeBron's going to be out. Don't yet know what's going to happen with Bronny with this ankle situation. Don't yet know what's going to happen with Vando and his quad situation. Maxi Kleber is also dealing with a quad situation. So it could end up even being like a decimated version of the healthy rotation at this point. With Vando, I think being like the biggest swing factor just in terms of like, he's probably a starter when this group is healthy, at least right now, like with no LeBron. So it sounds like it's going to be Ayton, Luka, Austin, Rui, Marcus, Gabe, Jackson, Dalton, and then TBD on a couple of the other guys. But if we get that, that'll be like the first real data point we can take from the preseason and extrapolate out. And it is going to be one data point, so it's a small sample size, but it will be our first look at like, what does this group look like at full strength? And having what's the starting group, what's the rotation, what are some of the second unit groups look like. JJ said he's going to do it similar to how Dallas did it tonight, where he wants to play the guys deep into the third or maybe even like early fourth. So I guess that's the blueprint that he's going to be going off of. But just think it's going to be interesting because as I've noted, I will not be covering that game live. It's my birthday. I'm going to be taking the night off with my wife, but I will be back Saturday to recap the game, and looking forward to Saturday morning, putting on the tape, going through it, and then going live and talking about it, because it will be our first time at a sample size with this group. And it's unfortunate it took till game 6 in the preseason, but it is what it is. As JJ has said multiple times, the Lakers are dealing with the cards they've been dealt, and we will see how things look on Friday and then going into Tuesday's season opener. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A here. First one from Braden. Thank you for the super chat. He always plays like that. The streets will call him Gabe the Babe Vincent. Miami Gabe is back finally. Thoughts, Brate? What's up, Braden? I think... So I'm not fully there with Miami Gabe back, because I do think, looking at the Miami Gabe situation, remember, like, part of that was injury related in Miami, where they were decimated with injuries and they needed him to step up into a higher usage role. And there were times where he was like the third guy for them behind Jimmy and Bam. And I just don't see that same type of, like, I think Gabe has shown he is a guy who can scale up into a higher usage role, but I still think it's a bit of a mixed bag, or just a little unclear as to how he can scale into what I think his role will be with the Lakers in the regular season, right? Because I still, even in the most optimistic viewpoint, we know like Luka and Austin are going to far and away be the top two guys in terms of usage, both like literal usage in terms of shots and assists and get to the free throw line and all that stuff, but also just like time with the ball. And those guys are going to be far and away the two primary guys. Then you start to get into Rui is going to get a certain number of shots. Like, that's just been his role with this team through now a couple of coaching staffs. DeAndre Ayton is going to be involved in a lot of screening actions. I think that's something we can take away from the preseason, is that they want to be aggressive with DeAndre, and whether it's high pick and roll or horns actions or stack actions, like they're going to involve DeAndre Ayton around the elbows and the top of the key. So he's going to have a certain amount of usage. Marcus Smart historically has had a certain role, a certain amount of usage with his team. So that's another factor that maybe Gabe can usurp him in the rotation, but I don't think that's a guarantee. And then we don't know where Dalton's at. And like, Dalton has a certain usage. So I just think there's a lot of mouths to feed. And that's before even mentioning LeBron eventually returning. And so within that, like, I just think Gabe is somewhere between like 5 to 7 in the pecking order. And probably I would argue closer to like 6 or 7. And I don't know if we have a clear answer yet of like, can he maintain that rhythm or even like spark that rhythm in a smaller role? Because again, I would note the two best offensive performances have come with multiple ball handlers out. And I don't think it's just as much, I don't think it's as simple as like he's just getting more shots. I think it's like the way he's getting more shots. And I don't know I think they can do a better job of trying to be intentional with how they use him and the pacing and him coming off screens. Like there are some things that are valuable and important with Gabe. I still want to see it in like, I would like to see it on Friday. Like let's see what it looks like if they have the full squad or 8 of the top 9 that are projecting to start the season. How does Gabe fit within that? Because I feel like he hasn't been as impactful in the games where they've been closer to full strength, or at least like Austin's played in. He still hasn't played with Luka yet. So that's something to monitor. But overall, like to be clear, I want to be clear. I am encouraged by Gabe. It's a bright spot. I just don't, I don't want to like ignore some of the context within this of like, I do think there's a correlation between him having a higher usage role, being more on the ball, being a lead ball handler, and just playing better offensively. And I think his previous track record of scaling down to a smaller role and still being effective is more of a, we'll just keep saying like a mixed bag, right? And we'll see. Maybe he can keep this going into the regular season. Jano, Dalton got to go, LMAO. I know this is a big sentiment among the fan base, and I get it. It's been rough, and it's been. I reference like it is a relatively small sample size of his shooting woes, but I still think it's probably less than 100 3-point attempts overall, where he's been at around 23%. But it's still enough of a sample size, and it's been enough of a time period where we're talking about like February to now over different portions of the season, regular season, summer league, preseason now. I don't want to speculate as to why he's dealing with some of these things. And I'm sure on some level getting traded, and then even like the Draymond thing was funny, but like you have to think that if has some impact on the guy, because that notion is kind of out there. Like he's been stamped with that to some degree. And if I'm an opponent and I saw the Draymond clip, like I'm going to start saying that to Dalton just to try and get in his head. And I think like that's something he's going to have to deal with now, is he does have this stamp of this guy was traded, that he got traded back. And like Mark Williams only had to deal with that for so long because he eventually got flipped to Phoenix. Dalton is in the same spot. So like he might just be in a situation where he needs a fresh start somewhere else, a clean slate. Like I truly think the best situation for him right now, based on what we've seen from him, would be to be traded to, honestly, like a Charlotte would have been a great situation for him. But like, I think he needs to play in a small market with low expectations, low like coverage and attention, and be like a bench scorer for some team in the Southeast Division or the Central Division, or like a Portland or Utah or something like that. Like I think he needs to raise to lower the temperature and like the spotlight on him, because it feels like it's kind of just been snowballing and spiraling in a negative way overall, in my opinion. But I get it. I think that the biggest issue with trying to flip him is you're just flipping him at such a loss that I don't really know what you're going to be able to trade him for. I don't want to say like you have to attach an asset, but you might. Like it really depends on who you're trying to get. He's also not at a high enough salary point to necessarily bring back like an impact player. It's potentially like another player on a rookie scale contract, which you got to think like, why is that team giving that player up just for Dalton, unless you are throwing in something of substance? So yeah, I would say like if we're talking about the stock report, he's someone who I think has been trending down throughout the entire preseason. And there have been some flashes of like the rebounding, of like some of the playmaking. I think the shot selection has been a little bit better, but yeah, I don't really see his fit on this team. Thoughts on Cooper Flagg? So this is the first game I've covered of his in person. I had seen film and highlights on him prior. He really like, I think the crazy thing with Cooper Flagg is this is a guy who should actually be, when you factor in the age and the fact that he reclassified, like this is a guy who should be going into his freshman year of college, and he's far from a fully formed product. I think for a player of like at his age and his experience level, like he's so far ahead of just about, most players that age. I think there are guys like maybe a LeBron, a Luka, a Kobe, like they're, and even Kobe had a slow start his rookie year. But I think Flag is at, for an 18-year-old, he's special. Now, him running the offense is like, I do think he's more of a secondary playmaker right now. And I don't think he should be running the offense full time. This is my concern with Dallas is my concern with Dallas is like, I think that they do have a lot of size and length. Some of it's a little overrated defensively, but they do have a lot of good defenders. But even with that, they're not getting out in transition and leveraging some of that athleticism and size and length. The half-court offense was a chore tonight, and it was a chore against not the Lakers' best defenders. Like, there was no DeAndre Ayton there. There was no Marcus Smart. Vando obviously exited the game early, so they were playing some against some lineup, and like you give the Lakers credit for that, but I also think you got to look at Dallas and sort of the underbelly of that team. So overall, I was impressed with Cooper Flag. I think the shot has looked pretty good, but I think that they're going to have some growing pains and a bit of a learning curve if he's running the offense. But I think defensively, I also don't love him defensively on point guards. I think he's more of a wing defender. So I think they are kind of playing him out of position, but this could be kind of throwing him into the fire and like longer term. When he's 20, 21, 22, I think he'll be in a different space. But overall, I think he's really, really good, and he's my pick for Rookie of the Year. And I mean, I said last night I said I think he has all-star potential. Maybe that's a little premature, but yeah. Rob says Luka played for real when he was 16. Yeah, no, I was saying Luka and LeBron, and like there's a few guys who I would put ahead of Cooper at this stage, based on where they were at when they were 18. But my point was, for an 18-year-old, I think he's playing at a level that very few players have ever been able to play at, in my opinion. Apples, if Philly sells at the deadline, DK/Jake/a 32 second for Adam and Oubre. Or Adam and Oubre. It's Adam, right? Sure. I mean, sure. That seems reasonable. I think it depends on like how important, like how Jake has been performing. But I do like Oubre, and you're not really giving up much in terms of draft capital. So yeah, sure. Tally says, let's ease on the DK hate. If we look at his progress from JUCO to Colorado to Tennessee, he might just need another year or two to replicate that in the NBA. That's a fair counterpoint. He has been something of a late bloomer, and he has been able to improve and adjust at each level. I think the fear with him, and my only counterpoint to this is like he's already 24, and at 24, like I think he should be more NBA ready than he is, or further along in that process. Like I think about, looking at a guy like Max Christie, who I think has been a little up and down in Dallas overall, but he's 21, going to be 22, like that. And he's already played, he's now in his fourth year in the NBA, and has started, played some big games, and got his second contract already. But I don't know. I think the one pushback to this would just be the age, and like in theory he was drafted to be. You just rarely see guys be 5-year college players come in as late as he did, and then also take like multiple years to pop. I think this is supposed to be the time he's popping, and I think the bigger thing I would say is that's discouraging is I'm not seeing the processing improve, the decision making improve. I think a little bit with the shot selection overall, which is nice, but he should be shooting the ball. Like he should have a floor as a shooter that is high. I think that's been maybe for me the biggest thing overall. Like we talk decision making, whatever. There should be a higher floor as a shooter with him that we just have not seen, and that to me, again, if that's like his primary NBA skill, which I think right now it is. if his floor is 23% as a shooter over an 8-month stretch, like that's pretty bad. I don't really know how else to frame that. But I'm with you in that. Like I think we do need to give him a little bit of time. Young Lito, thoughts on the Kings only playing Keon Ellis for only 7 minutes the last 2 games? I'm thinking he could be available for first. Yeah, I don't know what Sacramento's doing. I've been on record saying that now a couple times. That was before the Russ signing. I don't think that makes sense. It also doesn't really make sense because they invested a lot in Dennis Schroeder, and now at a minimum, you have a guy really competing. Like it was a multi-year deal for him to theoretically be their starting point guard of the short term, the next couple of years. And now you're adding in Russ, who I think he's had to sacrifice, obviously, with the Lakers and then the Clippers and then the Nuggets. But there was also there was always an element of, okay, with the Lakers, it's like he's playing next to LeBron and AD. He has to take that step back. With the Clippers, he's playing next to Kawhi and then eventually James Harden. And like he's got to take the step back, come off the bench. With the Nuggets, it's Jokic and Murray, and Murray's his direct competition and franchise guy, champion. He's got to come off the bench. With the Kings, I don't know if he's going to view it that way. And maybe he's been humbled a little bit by this whole free agency process and how long this all took, and the fact that it looked like for a good chunk there he was going to be out of the league. But I don't know if he looks at Domantas Sabonis and DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine with the same reverence as a LeBron, an AD, a Kawhi, a Jokic. And I don't even know how much reverence he even looked at those guys with. I just think he had to make certain sacrifices because of the situation. But we've seen Russ in situations where he does have to defer to people clearly better than him and more better than him in both in the moment, but also like LeBron and AD had won championships. Kawhi has won a championship. Jokic and Murray won championships. That's not the situation or the culture in Sacramento. So their defense, I mean, they were talking about today that their defense, it's got to be better for the regular season. I'm just like, you're not going to have a good defense when you're playing DeRozan, LaVine, and Sabonis together. And then like a small point guard, doesn't matter who you put out there, Ellis or Murray or whoever. I don't know what Sacramento's doing. So could Keon Ellis be available? Yes. I think Keon Ellis, maybe Devin Carter's available. I just don't know what they're doing, but I don't know if the Lakers will give up a first for him. That is a lot. And I do think the Lakers have a bit of a reputation for like liking name brand players, and Keon Ellis is not a name brand player, but I would consider it if I'm them. I think realistically it would not be very Lakers like to give up a first for Keon Ellis. Rock and Rolly, do you think Gabe might be our best two-way player? Potentially. That is in the realm of possibility with Gabe. I still think it's probably going to be LaRavia or Smart, but Smart didn't even take a shot in his first preseason game, and LaRavia has struggled as a shooter and just offensively with his own shot or finishing early, and defensively I think has been like above average to solid, but I think more in like a bench context of I thought maybe there's a little bit more like starter potential defensively with him that I don't know we've seen yet. Although again, I think there's a lot of caveats with a lot of this stuff just because we haven't seen the squad at full strength and real lineups yet. But you could make the case, like if Gabe's shooting the way he's been shooting, he has a claim for best two-way player in the rotation. Of course, like with LeBron out, I think LeBron then when he returns becomes that player when he's on defensively. Julian, Ayton isn't the long-term fit with Luka. Agreed. I think that's premature. I think we did see in that first half some of the warts where I think they are different types of pick and roll players. Luka loves throwing lobs. Ayton, I think, has struggled with lob catching and finishing through the first few preseason games. It's not something that necessarily comes naturally to him. He's more of a, I would say, more of a finesse big and more of a guy who likes to play in the pocket, more of a guy who likes to take mid-range jumpers around the elbows or inside the paint, floaters, hook shots. So I think he's not like the lively Gafford, Jackson Hayes type of finisher. He does have the length and athleticism to do those things. And I think it's going to be a process to extract that skill set and make him more comfortable with that. And I also think Luka's going to have to get more comfortable with pocket passes and playing to Ayton's strengths a little bit more. But I think it's premature. I think there are are there better options conceivably for Luka? Sure, right? Like a Derek Lively or a Walker Kessler, or like we could go through the list of young bigs who probably make more sense longer term. But I don't want to write off the Luka Ayton 2-man game or partnership one half into their career together. I think that's premature, but certainly there are some maybe limitations there or some things that they have to figure out. But I think that one's far too early to write off. Sky Falcon Jovan, what do you think happens with Dalton's third-year option? Any hesitation or auto pickup? It's a good question. I think there could be some hesitation. I will say optically, it is a death knell to a player if you don't pick up the third-year option. So if they don't pick up his third option, it's basically like you're out of here, whether you're signing somewhere else or we're trading you at some point. But the issue there then also is it affects his trade value. I think it's twofold, where one, there's the perception hit of just like, you didn't believe in this guy enough to pick up the third-year option. But two, then that guy is going to free agency earlier. And then if you're trying to trade him as the team receiving him, you don't have him necessarily locked up on that team-friendly deal for as long. So I think to preserve the optics of Dalton and to also keep him on a more team-friendly number moving forward, I think they do pick up the third-year option. But we could argue based on merit and performance that he doesn't deserve that. I wouldn't have I would not criticize them if they didn't pick it up. I think the only criticism would really be, I think you're lowering the value of that asset and you're making it harder for it to return to, I don't even want to say positive value, but at least like neutral value. I think you need, for the sake of him, like hope, for the sake of the Lakers, trade value wise, like I think that they should hope for him to play better. But I also think you have to do your part of it. And from a just basic asset valuation perspective, I think picking up the third-year option at least saves a little bit of the optics. It's not going to, like, again, make him a positive or neutral value necessarily, but it is, I think, at least not like if you don't pick up the third-year option on him, it is just basically saying we don't believe in this guy, and whether we trade him or let him walk, we want him out of here. Like that's what you're signaling. Puppy Chow 302, I like Claxton's defense and his contract. You don't have to sell me on Claxton. Those who have been following me for a while know I'm a big Claxton guy. I really, like, he was my top target for the Lakers going back to last trade deadline. Also into the summer, I thought they should have traded for him. They ended up with Ayton. I think Claxton's a more natural fit with Luka because he's a better lob threat, and I think he's a more versatile defender. But it's comparing the price of what would it probably would cost Rui plus something for Claxton versus getting Ayton just as a free agent buyout guy. Like, you could argue that Ayton is the better overall value. Lamar's Hall, it's crazy people blaming the Lakers for Russ's downfall. Like, yeah, I don't really want to go down this road with the whole Russ situation, but I think at some point when people would if you're in a situation and you keep losing friends, at some point you have to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I can't keep blaming everybody else for why I'm losing these people in my life or whatnot. And I think there's the analogy there is more so like he flamed out in LA. He flamed out in LA a second time. He flamed out in Denver. At some point it's like we can't keep blaming the Lakers and scapegoating them. I think at some point it's gotta be what is he doing wrong or is not doing right that is getting these teams to give up on him. Chucko Thunder, do you think the Lakers have a chance at getting Giannis? I do. I got aggregated the other day where someone had asked me about the theoretical value of keeping the picks long term, and I made a comment about like, well, if you want to get Giannis or think you have a shot at getting Giannis, the play is to maintain or keep the picks, and then like next summer you could make an offer with Reeves and connect and maybe Rui sign and trade. You have 3 picks to trade. Probably would have to throw in swaps. And that might not even be enough. I said I think they would be outbid and there are other teams who can offer more. But I also think based on what we've heard about Giannis over the last year, it sounds like he wants to go to a big city. So the Lakers in theory are, it's a short list of New York, Miami, Chicago, LA. Like those are the really big cities. If we're talking like top big cities, I guess San Francisco you could throw in there too, maybe. But it seems like the Lakers in theory would have a chance. Now, the reporting that came out since with ESPN and the Knicks being named specifically as the only team he was interested in, coupled with the Lakers pivoting more toward being open to taking on money, makes me a bit skeptical. I think right now, if I was doing the betting lines, I would have the Knicks as the heavy favorite for a potential Giannis destination. Now, it is tricky to make a Knicks trade work, so that opens up the door for him to potentially go elsewhere. But is that Brooklyn? Is that the Lakers? Is that the Clippers? Is that the Warriors? Is that there's a lot of different, is that Miami? Like there's different teams that could be. So I think the Lakers are in the next tier below New York, and that's probably a tier of several teams. But it does feel like for now, a lot of the smoke signals are he wants to be in New York. He wants to be a Knick. And again, I think it's a little tricky to figure out a fair trade because I don't, what does like Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges do for Milwaukee? Like if you're trading Giannis, you want young players and picks. You don't want to be, all right, you flip him for Towns and Bridges and you're like an 8 seed, a 9 seed in the East, right? Like you're still probably a play-in level team. So I don't see the point in that. So but you could also argue like, is Austin in 3 picks enough, right? And is Austin the guy that they want leading the next iteration of Bucks basketball? So there's not really a clear answer for me in the whole Giannis situation, other than it seems like he wants to go to New York, and that's the most likely scenario. So I do think the Lakers have a chance, but I would not make them the favorites, and I would not necessarily even make them the second favorites. I think Golden State has been really after Giannis for a while, and depending on how they play things, maybe could also get in the mix for him. So I have the Lakers on the second tier for sure, but I think they're jumbled with probably a few teams. Lego Tortoise Builder, Jovan, what do you think of the Dylan Brooks to Lakers trade speculation and talks? I'm on board with it. I think it would have to take Phoenix underachieving and underperforming for him to truly be available, but depending on the price, I would be open to it. I've come around on Dylan Brooks. I've accepted that the shot selection is going to be what it is. But Brian Farmer, where were you the night Magic resigned as Lakers GM? Reactions. That was the 2019 season, right? End of 2019. So it would have been, that was my first year on the Clippers beat. So where was I? I don't remember off the top of my head where I was. I do remember being in shock with it. And because I knew so many, like so much of Lakers media and just seeing their reaction to it, I'm going to pull up. I feel like I was on the road somewhere. Now they're home versus Utah. But then where were I don't know. I think maybe the Clippers were off that night. Oh no. That was after the Clippers game. So I guess I was there. Actually, I was there. They played. So I was there, but it was on the Lakers side where he held an impromptu. Okay, this is now coming back to me. So I remember people were like freaking out about it. I was pretty shocked. I knew things weren't going well, and it was a disappointing end to the season after the start that they had with the then the LeBron injury and the Zubats trade. But and then they were in that stalemate trying to get AD. But yeah, that was, certainly one of the craziest nights of NBA Twitter. And we still have the Magic meme of him doing the face. That's just an all timer. I will use that one. It's one of my go to NBA memes with people. So yeah. With the Lakers, you just never know what to expect, right? You have the Magic resignation, you have the Luka trade, you have LeBron going there, you have AD going there. It's just the Lakers, you just never know. That's what makes this job so fun. Best league, Jovan. Do you think Gabe could be better than Smart? I do. I think that's within the realm of possibility, especially if Smart has a set, if he's played 54 games the last 2 years. I would say on balance, he's still probably been better than Gabe. I think Gabe's a better scorer / shooter overall, although some of Smart's catch and shoot numbers are better or similar to Gabe's. But I think I trust Gabe a little bit more as a shooter, even with the up and down nature with him. But I think it's possible. I think the difference between them, I think they're ultimately going to have different roles. And I talked about this last night, but I think Smart is much more of a wing defender and Gabe's probably more of a point of attack guy. So they might fill different voids defensively. But yeah, it's definitely possible. I still would bet Smart is the better player overall. But if I maybe had 60-40 or 65-35 confidence before, I think that's starting to nudge down to 60-40 or 55-45. I see some of the DK stuff. I'm not going to get into some of the mental stuff. I don't want to speculate on that. I don't feel comfortable talking about that. Jake says, in hindsight, it would have been better to stick with the trade of Williams and move him in the offseason if you didn't want to keep him. I can't remember how many picks they gave up for him. They gave up a pick and a pick swap. So and Dalton. It was a hefty price for sure. And even at the time, I said it was probably an overpay, but I also understood it. And getting Luka, that type of guy, for the long run, obviously we did not have access to his medical, so we just have to go off of what was out there. But yeah, that's a tricky one. That it's easy to say that in hindsight. I think ideally they executed that trade a little bit earlier and could have made an amendment to it, or maybe they could have flipped or pivoted to a different player and been all right, this is already the price for a center. Can we get someone else and see if you could do that? But just the timing of it ultimately made it so they couldn't do that. Glenn says the Bucks just signed his whole family. He ain't going anywhere. So I actually think that's a fair point. I actually think the Bucks kind of losing their minds and just signing, they're going to sign one of his kids soon to a future 2-way contract probably. That to me is a little bit of an alarm with how nervous Milwaukee is moving in terms of, it seems like they really are we need to keep this guy. We're going to do anything we can, because objectively the Dame stretch and wave, I think is one of the craziest moves I can remember, especially in the more modern CBA practices. I think that's a giant mistake that Milwaukee, I think that kind of buried them for the next 2 years in terms of just their roster construction, especially post Giannis. And I think there will be a post Giannis. So look, maybe he really is just built different and he's going to be a one team guy. And I would commend him if he does that, but I also would understand if he wants out. And I just don't see a real path in Milwaukee right now to that team truly contending. Like, just because Giannis is so great, maybe they are the third or fourth best team in the East, but I think the gap between them and New York and Cleveland and maybe even Orlando and maybe Atlanta, maybe Detroit, like, I don't know. I don't see them coming out of the East anytime soon. Going to go about 5 to 10 more minutes, which means 30 to 40. I'm going to try to go 5 to 10. What Falcon? Ayton is better than Williams in the long run to me. You're probably right. I think Williams is probably the better lob finisher and like Luka fit in the pick and roll, but Ayton is a much more skilled and gifted and talented offensive player. He's double guy all 7 years of his career. I think Williams is a better rim protector, though it's probably close, but Ayton we've seen his activity in the pick and roll, and like I think he's a bit more mobile and versatile defensively. So, and then rebounding, I would give Ayton the edge. So yeah, I mean, I think to be clear, I think Ayton's a better overall player. I think there are certain things that Williams does that might have fit a little bit better with Luka and this team, but I don't know if that outweighs like the overall talent and production of Ayton, if that makes sense, right? Like sometimes guys can do certain things better or fit a little bit better, but then one player's just better. So you prefer the talent, the skill, the production, etc. So I expect Ayton to be a guy who's averaging, I mean, we'll see with the points because they've really struggled with entry passes and getting him involved, and they're still figuring out the pick and roll game with him. But I think eventually he'll be a guy in that 13 to 15 range, 10, 11 rebounds, and block to block and a half, and that's pretty much what you need and what you would expect from that position. Well, Morris, Jovan, was Luka to Orlando a possibility before he signed an extension? I don't think so. There had been a rumor going back to last year that Miami, and this is before I think I'd referenced this before on here. This is before the Lakers trade, but that like if Luka was going to leave Miami was a maybe like the primary threat looming for him if he left Dallas, but I did not hear anything about Orlando. I mean, technically, were they a possibility? Sure, but I had not heard anything of substance. Brian Farmer, are you higher on Flag or Wemby? Wemby easily. I think Wemby. Look, I'm high on Flag, but Wemby is 7'5", 7'6". He can, is on the trajectory to shoot like Kevin Durant and yet move like Giannis off the dribble and in transition and stuff. He's just like the biggest thing with Wemby's obviously got to be staying healthy, and he had the health scare last year, but also just historically you got knee injuries, foot injuries with players of that size. So that's the one thing to monitor, but it seems like he's taking care of his body and being very proactive with, stretching is a really big thing for him, and yoga. And obviously he was doing a lot of training this summer. So I'm higher on like Wemby. I think has the chance to be like an all-time, like I think there's a scenario in which he goes down as like a top 10 player. I don't know if I would, again, like that's like we're talking 95th to 99th percentile of Wemby's careers. He's a top 10 player. I don't know if there's any scenario in which Flag is a top 10 player, but we're talking all the time, not like in the league currently. With Flag, I think could be a Hall of Famer and has the potential to be like, okay, let me take a step back. Has the potential to be a Hall of Famer and like an all-time great. I just think like cracking that top 20, top 25, it's really tough. I don't really see that path for Flag yet. I want to see more from him. Wemby, I think from what we've seen, if he continues to improve, like he could go down as the greatest defensive player ever. I think that's within the realm of possibility with what he can do on that end. And just that alone puts you in a certain status. And then offensively, he continues to improve as a ball handler, as a shooter, as a finisher. So yeah, I definitely 1B. Sean Parker, Jovan, how do you think Rui will do with LeBron out? I would like to see it, right? I would like to see it to give you a better answer here, but I think he will benefit. The biggest thing, and I forgot who tweeted this out, so I apologize, but someone had tweeted out that Rui's drives per game, or maybe it was I think it was per 100 possessions with LeBron on the floor versus off. It was 3.5 per 100 possessions with LeBron on, 5.5 with LeBron off. So I think we see already Rui will assume some usage. He will get downhill more. He will be a little bit more aggressive in calling his own number. But I also think operating as, like, sometimes I think with LeBron off, the floor spaced a little differently and it's stretched a little more. There will be a little bit more high pick and roll, and that can allow Rui to eat on the weak side. And I thought there were some good plays against the Warriors with Rui, racking a closeout, and he likes to go baseline. But there was that one possession early where he goes into the middle and then a little dump off pass to Ayton for the 10, 12 foot little floater there. So I think Rui's a little bit more aggressive when LeBron is off the floor because he knows he can assume that usage. So I do think the interesting thing will be, I assume it's going to be Rui and Vando as the starters. And that probably slots Rui in a more appropriate position as a secondary defender rather than a primary defender, which I think is the way it should be. And Vando, having him out there, he's going to guard the best 1 through 4 guy. Rui will guard the secondary forwards, and Austin will guard the secondary guards. And I think that for who's available right now, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think he should be in a situation where he's set up to succeed and put up pretty good numbers, because he doesn't have to do as much defensively as I think the full strength team. When if LeBron's in there instead of Vando, now all that falls on Rui's shoulders. And I think that's too much to ask of him, especially against guards. But then also he's in a lower usage role. He's more purely just a spot up catch and shoot guy. And I think he's another, the Lakers do have several guys who I think play better touching the ball. I think it's Rui, it's Gabe, and it's Dalton. I think Rui, to his credit, has become a good enough shooter. And now we have back-to-back seasons of him as a 40% catch and shoot, 40+% catch and shoot guy. He doesn't need the ball to, he's a good enough shooter where he can not touch the ball for 5 minutes and still hit a three. I don't have the same confidence in Gabe and Dalton to do that. But I do think in general, though, Rui is a guy who needs the ball a little bit to be at his best offensively. So I think he'll benefit from that. And then defensively, again, secondary assignments I think are more appropriate for his defensive abilities. So I think he's going to play well without LeBron. Keon Park, thank you for the super chat. Peyton plays well this season. Ayton picks his player option up for next summer, and the Lakers want to give him a new contract. What would the numbers be? It's a good question. It's tough to say without knowing what exactly his numbers are and how if he's averaging 18 and 10 and the Lakers win 50 plus games and they go to the second round or third round and the fit with Luka is really good, is there a world where he gets 20 to 25? I think so. I have a hard time seeing it going above 25. And even if it goes into that 20-25 range, you are now substantially eating into your cap space. So you are, there's a whole thing with what happens with LeBron, but even putting the LeBron situation aside for this argument's sake, that's a big chunk of money that you are now allocating your assets into the Ayton bucket plus something else. And you are potentially limiting your ability to get a star. You could always flip him or Austin in the future and whatever, but you are kind of committing to that. Are there other scenarios in which I could see him being more of a 12 to 15 or 15 to 18, 12 to $18 million player. Yeah. I think there's a bit of a range of outcomes there, right? So if it's anything lower, he's obviously just going to opt in to the player option. And I think that's close to like 10-ish million next year or so. If I'm not mistaken, 9-10 million. Let me pull up his exact second year numbers here. But if it's around there, I think he just takes the contract. No, it's even lower than that. It's 8.1 million. So it's actually the exact same salary for both years. So he's making 8.1 next year. So my guess would be it's probably something in the 3 years, 45 million, and it's closer to 15 million. But I was more so hitting on like what the best case scenario could be. I think the more realistic scenario is somewhere in like the mid teens, but I think there's a wide range in terms of his production, how his production leads to team success, and his fit specifically with Luka. And I think he probably needs all three of those things to hit for him to be in the higher range of like 20 to 25. There's also scenarios in which he's in the middle, like 15 to 20. And then there's scenarios like 10 to 15. So I would say 15-ish feels about right. It's more of like a median outcome, but certainly could be a little bit lower, could be higher, and could maybe get into like the low to mid 20s. Although I think, again, that's like all these things go right with the Lakers that there's a lot of variables there. Sky Falcon 5 says, Rui said Bron likes to post up, so he spots up and cuts more with Bron, drives more with no Bron. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm glad you hit on the cutting, because the cutting has been a big thing with Rui, with LeBron, with AD, with Luka, with Austin. Like he's become a really good, like I really like the Rui fit offensively with all these guys. I think I've made this point a million times, but with Rui, it's just a matter of defense, where he just is not the level of defender to be a true wing stopper. And it's no shade or knock on him. It's just like no player's perfect. It's one of his weaknesses. And even in that regard, he's gotten a lot better. It's just, if you're playing next to Luka and LeBron and like that's your three forwards that are out there, Rui has to be the guy who's like guarding the primary guys. And that's just, I think that's not a sustainable defensive model for, I think you can get away with it for like 70 to 80% of the teams in the league. But when you get to the OKC, Denver, Cleveland, New York, Orlando, Houston, Minnesota, Clippers, Warriors, that tier of teams, that's where I just don't think that works. Puppy Chow 302, Jovan, I like your pod better than Trevor's. Lakers Nation, thanks for all your insight. I appreciate that. All love from me to Trevor and to Lakers Nation, but I appreciate being your favorite, and that means the world to hear. G, is it safe to say AR's average annual value will be 35 plus? Ooh, again, it's very early, so I don't want to make any like sweeping proclamations after we've seen Austin play in 3 preseason games. But to your point, like he's balled out at his point per minute or point per 100 possessions, points per 36 are eviscerating his previous numbers. And especially with LeBron being out at least a month-ish, Austin's going to have a really big month to the start to the season. So yeah, I mean, I think he's easily cleared 30, 35. I think he's going to have to maintain his production for most, like, last year's production kind of around, he's started to pop in like, or like take a real leap in like December, January. If he maintains that for this full season, I think 35 is in play and maybe even a bit higher. If he can somehow take another leap off of that and do that when LeBron comes back, now I think we're talking high 30s into, I believe his max is 42. And that then puts him in a different class of player and also puts a lot of pressure on the Lakers to figure that out. So, I mean, if I had to make a prediction right now, I think mid 30s is probably where it goes, somewhere between we'll say 34 to 36 in terms of like starting salary for the first year and then going up. So honestly, that already might be average annual value a little bit over 35 because typically there's the 5 to 8% raises depending on the structure of the contract and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, I think he's already in that ballpark, but maybe it starts a little bit lower at like 31, 32 the first year, 34, 35 the second year, then 37, 38, and then maybe even gets up to closer to 40, and then it averages out to like 35, 36. But I think there's a lot of variance in a lot of variables that will play into what type of contract Austin gets and who it ultimately is with. Darth Dan with the comment of the show. He could pick up his $8 million player option and then plant some trees for $48 million. You actually don't have to even plant trees for $48 million. You just have to sign a contract. Zoop Cut, I'm glad you brought this up because I was meaning to respond to your comment about Caruso not being a two-way player. So a couple things. Two-way, I think, is relative, right? Like it depends on how lenient you want to be with the definition. I think looking at Caruso's numbers, so he's only averaged, for a lot of people, points are a big thing, right? So he's only averaged double-digit points once in his career. So if we're looking at it through that perspective, he's played 8 seasons. He's been a double-digit scorer once. So we'll say if that's your bar for it, no. I do look at the assists, and I think there's been a real growth in his playmaking, where a few years ago, 4 assists per game, 3 years ago, 3, then 2 years ago, 3.5. In OKC, he just was playing far more off the ball and even more as like a wing than being more of a guard with the Lakers and the Bulls, though, because of his defensive versatility, he could defend multiple positions. But I look at the assists and the playmaking, and then also the shooting. The shooting has been up and down, but it has largely been progressing, especially as he's scaled up the volume. But look at the last 3 years, 36%, 41%, 35%. So I guess it depends how lenient you want to be with the two-way definition. Like, to me, he has become a average-ish to even slightly, like he's been an above average shooter in 3 of the last 5 years on threes. And that, coupled with the cutting and off-ball ability, both in the half court and transition, and the playmaking, I do think he's I personally view him as a net positive on offense. I think it's a slight net positive, and certainly he's got some limitations. Like, again, the scoring is what it is. He's not a big offensive threat, but I think if you're just going off of points, you can make, and I'm not saying you are, I'm just stating that as like a blanket statement. But I think within the nuance of like, he's often like, part of the Caruso, I think, fit and charm is that he can fit next to high usage guys. And we saw him fit really well next to LeBron and AD. We saw him fit in Chicago. I guess their version with Levine and Vucevic and then, in OKC next to Shea and J-Dub and Chet. So I think, sorry, my mic got unplugged there. I don't know. I also think to compare him to Vando, right? Like I just think there are some things that he does offensively that if we're comparing it to like a guy like a Vando or some of the guys who are limited defensively but good offensively, I just think he's got some offensive skills that make him a good, or at least like a neutral to slightly positive offensive player. Again, if you want to quibble with how talented he actually is as a scorer, and if that is your barometer for that, then like I get you. And sorry, my computer wigged out on me. But yeah, I mean, if you want to quibble with it, I don't have an issue with it. Jordan, thank you for the super chat. Were you ever able to confirm if Adu actually had surgery or not prior to his time with the Lakers? He did. He had surgery in March. So he had surgery right after the season, or I think it actually might have been, season, or yeah, it was in March. So it was right after the season or his season ended. And that's why JJ had the comment earlier in camp where he said, like, unfortunately, his surgery and like initial recovery were outside of the Lakers' hands because he was not a Laker at that time. So he had that 3-month window where he had surgery and was doing recovery and rehab and whatnot. And then the Lakers drafted him. The pushback to that would obviously be like, did the Lakers not do their due diligence on him, or did they not know maybe it was as bad as it was? And like, that's kind of on them at that point. It's a risk to draft a guy coming off of surgery a few months earlier and to pay a relatively hefty price of like, it was just cash and ultimately like that's what they should be doing. But they did make a couple trades to trade up and spend several $1 million to get him. So yeah, but to the question, yes, he did have surgery in March. Kami 282, Dallas really missed Luka's playmaking in the first half. Yeah, it's almost like they shouldn't have done the trade. Look, it worked out, I guess, with getting Flag, and like I think now they're in an interesting spot where I think they're going to be at full strength once they get Kyrie back. They're going to be pretty good in the now, and they are set up for the future. Although I would argue they were set up for the future with Luka, and they'd built a pretty good team around Luka, and I will never understand the trade, but yeah, they certainly missed him. Glenn, Jovan, if this year doesn't pan out, do you see the new owners cleaning house and starting rebuilding the front office? And always shout out Late Night Gang. It's an interesting question. I think based on the Luka trade and getting Luka to extend, I would be shocked. I'd be shocked if Rob was not the president of basketball operations and GM going into next season. Now, maybe the following summer, if let's say it's the disaster scenario you're talking about, or like things don't pan out, then they don't make. There's like a doomsday situation, let's just say, where like things go awry this year for whatever reason. LeBron leaves or retires next summer, and then Austin also leaves for another team. And now they're in this really weird position where they have cap space, but it's not a great free agent class. There isn't a like for like replacement for LeBron or Austin. And now they're either signing a bunch of 1-year deals or maybe like 1+1s, or maybe they are signing some multi-year deals, but it's not like the ideal build around Luka, and they don't even have like a number 2 guy, let alone a number 3 guy. I'm just painting out like the worst case scenario. Maybe in that case, going into 2026, 27, there are some hard conversations, or at least like, after that season, they reevaluate. I think that it's just hard to look at the last 8 months of the Luka trade and the extension and not feel like there's a deserved grace period and just, he just got extended a few months ago. I have plenty of issues with a lot of the inactivity and not making trades, and I've been critical of plenty of things. So I'm not trying to defend anything here. I'm just being honest of like, I think it's hard to trade for Luka and be out within like a year and a half. I think that trade probably buys you a couple seasons. Jalen, are the Lakers more of a business or a championship contender? That's a tough one. It depends on how you want to expand the championship potential. Like, I don't think they're in the inner circle of championship contenders right now. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty with the whole LeBron situation. And I don't see a scenario in which they can win a championship if LeBron is not healthy and playing at like an all-star, if not all-NBA level. So I think the LeBron situation, until we have more clarity, does give me some pause with this whole season, to be completely honest. But I'm going to assume that because it seems like more of a short-term thing and he's going to be back at some point in November, and just knowing LeBron and covering LeBron, and like we've yet to really see a compromise LeBron. I'm going to assume he's an all-star, all-NBA guy. I will put them as not a first tier or maybe second tier contender. I'm somewhere between second and third tier contender, but they're definitely a business. So I don't know, between those two, that's kind of hard. But I guess we'll see. Like, ask me in mid-February and let's see if they made a trade or not. Best league, Jovan, do the Lakers really want to give 30 plus million to AR, and will it be a mistake? I think they want to retain AR. Of course, if he would, I mean, they offered him the contract extension because they're hoping he would, I mean, it was a formality, but they also wanted him to accept less in the unlikely scenario he did. He obviously didn't. I don't think it'll be a mistake because I think barring Austin, unless this is like a 4-year Linsanity run for Austin, like I think there are some warts and there are some weaknesses and there are some things that you have to account for when you're building around Austin. But I think there are plenty of worse players who are in that $30 million range, 30 to 35, that I don't see a scenario in which Austin is like a negative value in the next couple of years on that contract. So the thing I've been advocating for is you re-sign Austin this summer, and if it doesn't work in the playoff, like even if it doesn't work in the playoffs, I think you re-sign him and then you flip him the following year, and he's making a big enough salary that you can get back a big piece. And you do probably have to attach some draft capital, right? But if you can have Austin in like 2 picks, I think you could get a pretty good player back. It also depends on the team you're trading with and what they want, what they need, whatever. But I just don't see a scenario in which he is like they re-sign him to whatever contract they sign him to, and the rest of the league is like, well, that's just a terrible contract. Like, maybe if it's in the max 42 million, like there are some eyebrow raises, and maybe that's too high for most people. But I think especially if it's in the 30 to 35 range, I think that's honestly like arguably a bargain based on his production. And again, like you look at his numbers last year, and the guys who were putting up the same numbers were all-star, all-NBA guys, and guys who are making 50 plus million, 60 plus million. I'm not saying he should make that. I don't, based on his like just overall, but Austin at 30 million versus some of these guys at 50 million, it's like, I think I think he's on a little bit of a discount, and that's fine. But I think it's a tradable contract is my point. Angelo says Mike got unplugged. The RE20 would never. I like it, and I will be switching back to the RE20 once I'm home. What actually happened was my AirPods just died, and I don't even know why I have them in, but they died, and then it changed my camera and it changed my mic. I'm just gonna take them out. All right, we'll go 5 more minutes until the 1:30 mark. Hair's getting hit. It's been a rough hair trip for me. I don't have all my stuff. Jake from State Farm, what do you think of Murray's contract? Assume okay, Keegan Murray. I was actually gonna. My first thought was DeJounte Murray, but Keegan Murray. I think it's fair. And there was the one person I got into it with about Rui versus Keegan Murray, or it was actually in the comments. Someone said they don't think Keegan Murray is better than Rui. I think this contract, I mean, ultimately, like there are different ways to judge players, right? And I don't think contracts are always the end all be all, but I don't think Rui is going to get the same contract. I think Rui is probably going to be someone in the $18 to $22 million range. So like not that far off from Murray, but Murray's average annual value is about, I believe 28, if my math is correct. So I think Murray's a better player, and I think the market is reflecting that. Sean Parker, Jovan, will you do a meetup in New York City this year? Yeah, I will. And the cool thing about that trip is it's both Knicks and Nets. So I'm going to end up being out in New York for probably like 5 or 6 days. So maybe I'll even do 2 meetups. But yes, definitely planning on doing a meetup in New York. Sky Falcon 5, they paid him extra to put up with the Kings. That's probably true and fair. I mean, I think it's a fair contract for him. I think maybe it's a little. He's probably, to me, more of like a mid-20s player, but I don't have a big issue with it. Keon Park says Rui should get 4 years, $90 million. So that's what, 20, a little over 22. That's almost $23 million a year. Yeah, that seems about right for Rui. I think one interesting thing with Rui will be like the fit of whether that's with the Lakers or a different team, because I've made the point before, and I'm actually going to hit on this. I got a mailbag question about it. I think ideally with Rui, you slot him. Like, I think the two best situations for Rui, and granted, you could probably say are the best for a lot of players, but I think there's a specific need for like a Rui type is like, I have referenced multiple times, like Minnesota and OKC to me, of having an elite defensive center and an elite wing defender. And if Rui is your third best defender in the front court and also has like a really good rim protector, a really good wing defender, and good rebounders around him, and you cover up his weaknesses that way, and offensively, maybe you could do a little bit more than he does with the Lakers. Like in this scenario, let's just say hypothetically, he's replacing Julius Randle. Of course, Minnesota gets worse because he's not as good as Julius Randle, but you could see him amassing more usage offensively. And I think like Jaden McDaniels would get more usage. Naz Reid would have a bigger role in the offense. DiVincenzo, there's a trickle down effect where there's more of it, but like that does more for Rui offensively. But then defensively, he's covered by Gobert. He's covered by McDaniels. Those guys are both good rebounders for their positions. And then you have the wing defender center. OKC, similar thing with either Hartenstein or Chet, and then J-Dub. So I think ideally there's a specific build with Rui. If it's Ayton, if the other two guys are Ayton and Luka, technically, because Luka is a front court defender, although he's a guard offensively, that to me, I have a little bit more concern with longer term, because I don't think Ayton is at that same Gobert, Chet, or even Hartenstein level defensively. And then Luka's obviously not in the McDaniels J-Dub tier. So I do have some concerns with Rui, because a big question I've gotten, or a question I've gotten frequently, has been like Rui as the LeBron replacement. Like I see it in theory, but I do think you have to be careful with the build then, because maybe it is Vando in there. I don't know, as a starter, but like longer term too. I don't know. I think you got to be careful with how you build the front court around Rui, because I think you ideally need two really good defenders around him and good rebounders. And if you don't have that, I think there's just a limitation to your defense. Your boy says super late night. Yes. Wow. I didn't even realize, but yeah, it was a 7:30 game. So that's, Wilma, is there flopping in Serbian pro basketball? I mean, there's flopping in all basketball. I think, like look at international soccer and there's a lot of flopping. I don't think it's at the NBA level though, of guys I think there will be guys selling contact or selling, getting hit by a screen or something, but I don't think it's to the level of the jumping into the guy who's on your hip or on your shoulder or something and drawing it that way. So I don't think the NBA is particularly egregious with some of the flopping. What's up, Pugzilla? White Falcon says, will you travel to Asia or sea? What do you mean by sea? Unless that's reference I don't get. Asia is on my list, and I want to go there within the next year and a half somewhere, do an Asia trip. So we'll let you guys know on that. El Mangi, Jovan, what media are you right now? I'm my own media. I'm independent. I'm Buha's block. I actually took a little clip for the vlog that I'm going to be doing, and it's cool to essentially I'm credentialed and going to these games just for me and my own content. And that's pretty cool because basically everyone else there is working for a company and, working for someone else. And I'm able to work for myself and building this thing and this platform and this community. And it's been really cool to see that to start the season. Cole says C equals Southeast Asia, probably. Got it. Okay. Yes. I'm need to Europe, got to do a Serbia trip next summer, got to do a Germany trip, probably going to Italy. Also, though, need to do an Asia trip. Also need to do a Puerto Rico trip. So I got a lot of trips. Ronnie, what's up with the background, Buha? I'm in Vegas. I was at the game tonight. So I just got back. I'm staying in a hotel. Pugzilla, any update on a media versus coaching staff? Not yet. I considered asking JJ pregame, but the vibe wasn't there. And then certainly post-game, he was not in the best mood with the loss. So I think it's more of a practice question. So next practice, I can ask him. Keon Park, then are you CEO? Technically, yes, I do have an LLC, which is, I started and is what I'm, with payment and taxes and stuff is behind Buha's block. So yeah. Sky Falcon 5, ever done a cruise? I've done a cruise once. I did it senior year of college. Spring break cruise through parts of Mexico, Cabo and Puerto Vallarta. So yeah, that would be. It was a 7-day cruise. It was a Carnival cruise. A time was had. It was fun. Kami 282, go to Japan. That right now is at the top of my list of that's my number one travel destination I want to go to. Keon Park says world tour. Hey, don't tempt me with a good time. I love traveling. War 2D2, favorite Vegas restaurant. I honestly haven't eaten at that many places here. Especially because I think with LA, there's a lot of places that are also in LA that I can eat in LA. Whereas Vegas, I think if you're visiting from somewhere else that maybe doesn't have that, it's more of an experience here. But I would say Momofuku and Carbone are Carbone we don't have in LA. That's a New York thing. I think there's one in Miami if I'm not mistaken. But Carbone for Italian and the scene, especially during summer league, you just never know who you're going to see there. It's a bunch of I think last year I saw Gabe there and a lot of players and agents and all that stuff. And then Momofuku I did twice at summer league, so I've actually done it I think the last 2 years twice. So it's definitely one where also because of the variety of the menu, you could have two completely different meals there in your two sittings. So those two places. Sean Parker, what's your vertical? Well, I tore my Achilles 2 years ago, so whatever it was, it's lower now. I don't know, but I've become more ground bound in my post Achilles life. Also, I saw someone asked about the Dodgers. Yes, the Dodgers are going to win tomorrow. Best League, Jovan, thank you for your time. Good night. Yeah, I'm going to wrap here. I went, of course, 5 minutes over the 1:35. I appreciate you guys for watching and for rocking with me late into the night, deep into the night, as we do with the Late Night Gang. I see Harry Chinani with the quick super chat here. How concerned are you, Pugzilla? Thank you for becoming a member. Harry Chinati, how concerned are you that the main rotation players didn't get enough reps during the preseason? I think this is a good way to end it and kind of push this forward, this whole conversation. I'm a bit concerned. I think that coupled with LeBron's absence is partly what makes me concerned, because I think already there's going to be an adjustment period of not having LeBron, and it's not as easy as like picking up where they left off last year and just slotting in Ayton for Hayes or Laravia/Smart for like DFS and Goodwin. Like I think there are some real changes that are going to happen, at least in the short term. Now, they have had a lot of practices. Guys have been limited and stuff. So, I mean, they haven't gotten the game reps that I would have liked up to this point. But that said, like I'm a little concerned to maybe start the season. I don't think it's going to have this ripple effect of like 20 games in, we're still talking about this, and we're still like, well, if they had only done, but more in the preseason. I think it's more of a short-term thing where maybe the first few games they start 1-2 or 1-3 or something, and that can have an effect later in the season. But I think it's more like it's something you can get past. I'm a little worried with like a slower start than maybe is ideal, but I don't think it's going to have this like major impact, if that makes sense, because they have gotten the practice reps to a degree where most of these guys have practiced together at least a couple times, like 2-3 times minimum, if not multiple times. So, or more than that. But yeah, I mean, I would have liked to have seen the group full strength for 2 times. Like that would have been nice, especially with how like the part that doesn't really connect for me is what's the point of having 6 games if you're only going to take one of them seriously? And I know some of it's injury related, but okay, so you don't have LeBron for the full time, but Luka's healthy, Austin's healthy. Okay, Smart's been dealing with something. Adu and Maxey are fringe rotation guys anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But like Rui's healthy, Vando was healthy. Now we don't know. Ayton's healthy. Like you still could have had a scenario in which you played these guys at least like 8 or so of the top 9 or 10 in a couple games together. That just didn't happen. So, but I'm not concerned in the long run. I am concerned in the short term. And I guess the argument you can make is that every game counts in the West. And if they do go 0-2 to start and lose to Golden State, Minnesota, that puts them a little bit behind the 8 ball. And then you also just don't know when LeBron's coming back. So I am a little concerned. I'm not going to like sit here and say there's nothing to be worried about. But I also think that they have Luka Doncic. And when you have a top 3 or 4 player in the league, your margin for error is a little bit higher. So I think they should be able to remain above 500 without LeBron. And then once LeBron comes back, that's when they push into that, a team that could be a home court advantage team. Glenn says 5 more minutes with the super chat. Well, I just went 5 minutes answering Harry's question. Diego couldn't go to sleep, come back online, and Jovan is still alive. Who would have thought? Man, I really have a reputation, huh? Thomas, do you think Hayes outplayed Lively? It's a good question. I think it was close. Maybe? Yeah, if we're all, yeah. I think it was pretty close. Because Lively's numbers are pretty similar, but he also got some of that in like the 3rd and 4th when Hayes was out. So yeah. Especially grading on like a slight curve of expectations for sure. Your boy, when's the 24-hour stream coming? It's coming. I am trying to stream more frequently in general, outside of just the late night. Lego Thor Spiller, Jovan, you're in Vegas. Go for 2 hours for Vegas life. Yes, but I do. If you guys want more content, I am recording a podcast tomorrow and I got a meeting in the morning. So because of that, I am going to wrap here, and I'm going to give Pugzilla his. I had not seen the Austin. Blonde Austin is a sight that is a sight to behold. But I appreciate you guys. I'm going to a Buha-thon. Yeah, we'll do the Buha-thon soon. But I'm going to wrap here. I got to edit this audio, get it up, and then get ready for podcasting tomorrow. And then also driving back to LA. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for rocking with me for over an hour and a half. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. Memberships are live. They've been live for a couple weeks. And also we have the new Discord. So check out the new Discord, whether or not you are a member. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back later today with a new podcast episode. New mailbag, and then I'll be back after that on Saturday morning, or late morning, early afternoon to break down the preseason finale. So it'll be a midday gang that day, but sometimes you gotta celebrate your birthday. So appreciate you guys. Talk to you all soon. Shout out to the late night gang.